Ta-da! Well, good morning. Welcome back to Weems Motor Co. Today we're back in the shop and we are going to be talking about ignition systems.
Remix to ignition, hot and fresh out the kitchen.
Over the last 100 years on motorcycles, they have essentially went through 4 different changes in ignition systems. You might be asking yourself, well, what's an ignition system? Well, essentially, ignition system is the ability to transition electrical current into a spark for the internal combustion engine to fire and run.
Eureka!
Over the last 100 years, like I said, there's been a lot of transitions, and I'm going to just touch on the top 4 for Triumph motorcycles. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to work our way back into history. So the most recent ignition system that is available for a modern Triumph motor, or even your normal Harley Davidson, Honda, whatever you ride, is the electronic ignition system. Now, this system is a great system. It obviously, with technology advancing, it enables you to have a good power band across the rev section. It gives you a little bit more performance. It's a great system. However, it does have its limitations. With the electronic ignition system, this one being a Boyer-Branson system for a unit Triumph. Now, what's a unit Triumph? A unit Triumph is a Triumph motor made from 1963 through 1983. It's when they combined the transmission and motor into one combined unit, making it a unit. Everything made prior to 1963 was considered a pre-unit. The transmission was separated from the motor. This system is made for a unit Triumph motor. There's several different brands out there. This is a Branson, Boyer. There's also Payson. There's several of them out there. But essentially, this system works off of the rotation of the exhaust cam, and it rotates this little pickup plate. Now, this pickup plate has 2 magnets on it, and they transition to these 2 poles on the inside. So as it rotates, it transfers that magnetic current into these coils, which transition it into an electronic signal. Now, the signal coming from the points pickup plates is going to go to a separate ignition module that transitions it over to what you need is a coil. Now, this is a dual lead coil, something kind of familiar with like on a Harley Davidson. Earlier Triumphs had 2 separate coils. They could be 6 volt, they could be 12 volt, depending on the system. However, the current coming from the ignition system would go into the coil and it would be electrically charged, sending spark through the spark plug leads or the spark plug wires, however you want to say. Well, where is the power coming from, you might say, that transitions into that? Well, you have to have a battery. Now, this is a typical motorcycle battery. And what we're going to talk about is, do you want to run an electronic ignition on your particular motorcycle or not? Now, if you're building, let's say, a restoration, yes, go for a battery. You want to make sure that you have all of those units and you're going through the proper routes of routing everything and wiring it correctly. Now, Triumphs were a positive ground system. That means the positive side of the battery grounded through the frame, and the negative side of the battery ran the current to everything that was needed to be powered. So make sure you know if your bike is a positive ground or a negative ground. Now, if you're building a chopper or a bobber, this big bulky battery might not be what you want because you're looking for a clean, nice, no frills looking bike, and it's hard to hide something like this. You can't just shove it up underneath the tank. You got to build a box for it so it'll hold and be secured. So there was another option. What I like to do on some of the bikes that require a battery is I go out and I purchase a battery for an emergency system or an exit sign. What's cool about these batteries is obviously they're a lot smaller. You can tell the difference. Big battery, a little bit smaller. It's a lot easier to hide this battery. You can mount it up underneath the oil tank, underneath the seat, just depending on your tank. You could possibly fit it underneath there. But what you got to do is make sure that when you go to purchase these that you do get a 12 volt and at least have a 7 milliamp power push to maintain that current going out. And it's perfectly fine to use these. I've done it on plenty of custom builds. Another option is the capacitor. Now the capacitor system, obviously it's the smallest of all, and there's a few different brands that were made, a system called a Mighty Max, but a lot of guys use this capacitor right here. The challenge with the capacitor is it is an electrical unit that only holds just a little bit of charge, and it's enough of that charge to make the spark plugs fire once or twice. These were known to fail. They weren't the greatest systems. They were finicky at best, and it was hard to maintain lights like your headlights or tail lights when you're running a capacitor system unless you have a really good charging system. So this is another option. They work. Just know that they're a little bit finicky. They can fail on you.
What have you been up to, mate?
Just been working on my new song.
Well, that's good. Well, what's it called?
It's called What's the Point?
Going on to the next system, we're going to move a little bit further back, and we're going to talk about our points ignition. Some people also call them contact breakers. Now, with the contact breaker or point system, it mounts in the same location on a unit Triumph motor. It runs off of the rotation of the exhaust cam. And at the end of that exhaust cam, there is an attachment that looks like another separate cam. So that cam would come out and it would rest on the side of one or two, most of the time being two, of these point systems. As that cam turned, being oblong, it would open and close the contact breakers, the point breakers. Now, if you look really closely at the point brakes, there are two little small pads, and those pads, as the cam turns, would open and close, but you would want to make sure that you adjust these so that it only opens so much. What's great about this system, unlike the electrical system, is that you break down on the side of the road, you can do maintenance on these. Your user manuals, owner's manuals would tell you how to adjust and how to clean your points. So if you're stuck on the side of the road and you have a point system, chances are you can get it fixed, get on the road, get back home. With that electronic ignition system, you're pretty much stuck. So points were really great. Thing about points, you also had to have the battery to give it power, and you also had to have a condenser. The condenser was able to take the excess current to make sure that everything was running properly, so that when that little spark happens and the points separate, that it sends the signal to the coils. You had to have a set of coils for the point system, and it would get out to your spark plugs and cause the motor to run. So this was the older version. I like these. They're easy to maintain. Sometimes they can be a little finicky if you don't know what you're doing, but the point system was a great ignition system. All right, the next system we're going to talk about is a special
Awesome.
system.
Well, isn't that special?
This system is called Lucas Rita. Lucas is an electronic manufacturer and engineer from England, used on many of the British motorcycles and even British cars, Jaguar being one of those.
Wow.
Now, Lucas has a lot of jokes within the motorcycle community as being known to be the Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness, the devil?
Oh, really?
Now, Alright, so basically what that means is you're riding your motorcycle down that dark country road in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden your headlight just goes out. You're stuck in the dark because of Lucas. They are the Prince of Darkness. These systems have been known to fail. People do not like Lucas Electronical Systems. There's jokes. There's funny things to be said. There's a joke that says, why do Englishmen drink their beer warm? Because Lucas made the refrigerators too. Boom. So, Lucas is not the greatest systems. However, they were great for what they did. You didn't expect a whole lot from them. They just did enough. Now, we talked about the unit and the pre-unit transitions. What was great in those last few years of the pre-unit motors was that Lucas came out with a system called Rita. Around 1958 through 1962, you would find these coming into the motors, and it was a new technology made by a company that's not too reliable. So not a whole lot of people wanted the Lucas Rita systems. They are pretty rare to find. If you do find them, they're normally incomplete. But when you do find them, it's normally going to go for a Concours restoration or something like that. What I love about the Lucas Rita system is that it combined the technology from years before to technology that wasn't designed yet. That being the electronic ignition. It bypassed this whole point system. So this right here is a Lucas Rita ignition system. This was designed to be mounted on the pre-unit Triumph, and it ran off of the pinion gear of your intake cam. As the intake cam spun, it would spin this gear, and it would cause the charge to go. Now, very similar to the electronic ignition, you have a little cam in the center. As this cam turns, it would cross the pickup, sending signal from the unit to an ignition module. Now, this ignition module has tons of wires. A lot of the guys who are used to the earlier design of the Magneto system did not like this. These were additional wiring that had to take place on their motorcycle. In addition to the ignition module, you had to have a separate either set of coils or a dual lead coil like this one, making more things on the motorcycle, more chances for things to fail. So this being a special system was great as it brought new technology to the motorcycle market. However, if it was maybe designed and engineered by a different company, it may have become a standard item.
My name is Magneto.
Now the final system, the Magneto, my personal favorite. The Magneto was an all-in-one unit. You didn't have to have a separate set of coils. You didn't have to have an ignition module. You had everything right in one complete unit. And that unit looked like this. Pretty much a heavy little brick. Now the way the system worked was very much like the Lucas Rita system, where the gear ran off of the pinion of the intake cam. The same thing was on this system. Now, there are many different brands of Magneto ignitions, even for unit construction Triumphs. There's companies such as Joe Hunt and Morris Magnetos that make Magneto systems for your unit Triumph. They even make Magnetos for pre-unit Triumphs. However, the systems I'm going to talk about are the original systems to the Triumph pre-unit. That being made by Lucas, the Prince of Darkness. Now, Lucas had essentially two Magnetos that you would find on a majority of your pre-unit Triumphs. That being the Lucas Competition Magneto and the Lucas K2F. Now, the K2FC is the Competition Magneto. So essentially you have those two. You go buy your new bike and you find it sitting in a shed and you go out and look at it, and maybe the data plate is still readable, such as this one here, but it could also look like this, where the paint has just worn away and you cannot know for sure, and you simply just look at them. If you can't see on the data plate, you look at your pickup. Now, what's a pickup? Now, it's not a truck that you ride in the back of in the country.
No hands!
While your boys are out throwing their beers down. No, a pickup is the unit that mounts to the magneto where the spark plug lead hooks to. Now, in the pickup, there is this really small spring-loaded coil that has a piece of carbon at the end. A lot of people think it's plastic. It's actually a piece of carbon. Now, the way to tell the difference between the competition Lucas magneto and the K2F magneto is the style of the pickup. You'll notice on the competition magneto that the pickup is actually screwed into the housing. On the K2F, the pickup is held in by a clip, and you simply slide it in and you move the clip back over and it holds it in place. Yes! So that's a little piece of advice. If you're looking at a bike and you're wondering what kind of magneto is on it, that's the difference between the competition and the K2F. Now, on the magneto system, you might be saying, if everything's built into one unit, how does it work? Well, essentially, this system works off of magnetic energy.
Oh, eureka!
Inside this housing are actually two magnets, and there's a coil on the inside that rotates, making a magnetic field of energy that transitions back to a set of points. Not even a set, just one set of contact breakers. And as it rotates, this ring at the end of the magneto is actually oblong. So as it spins, it opens and closes that point on the inside of those. As it opens, it sends a slight spark, and it tells this unit to send that spark through the pickup and out of the spark plug lead to the spark plug. And that's what's great about this system, is you do not have to have a battery. You do not have to have a set of condensers. You do not have to have a coil, whether a set or dually coil. Everything is right in one unit. Now, as we're talking about this, let's talk about spark plugs. Essentially, there are two types of spark plugs that you will be needing for your Triumph motorcycle, and they look similar. However, one has a longer thread length than the other. The shorter thread length would be found on the iron head motors, and the longer thread would be found on your aluminum head motors. So that's just a piece of information. Cool. If you're looking at a motor and you're like, does it have a cast iron head or does it have an aluminum head? Just pull the spark plug out, look at the length of the spark plug, and that'll give you a good idea. If not, take a magnet. Touch it to the cast iron or aluminum head. If it's magnetic and it sticks, then you have a cast iron head. And that's it. Essentially, we've talked about the four main ignition systems over the past 100 years. And this is pretty standardized across the board. Whether you have an old Harley Davidson, an old Triumph, an old BSA, that is essentially what you will be facing when it comes to ignition systems. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the assembly of the magneto for the 1951 Hollywood Run David Mann replica. We're going to be utilizing a Lucas K2F magneto, and we're just going to do a speed build for you guys. Enjoy. Alright guys, well hopefully you enjoyed this last episode. I know it was a little bit in-depth and a little bit nerdy, but I get really excited about all these quirky things about these Triumphs. So make sure that you guys go and hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, turn those notifications on, and if you're not following us on Instagram, head over there, follow us there. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.